So I work with EBSCO Industries. Has anybody ever heard of EBSCO? Who has not heard of EBSCO? Yeah, oh, wow. I figured that way. So EBSCO, we're based in Birmingham, Alabama. I've been working there since just after Thanksgiving. And EBSCO is actually, it stands for Elton B. Stevens Company. So it's a privately held company in Alabama. It's been around 75 years now, and great to be there. So I've had 27 years of experience in information systems and security. I love IT crowd. Anybody love IT crowd? Pretty funny. But it made me think about what used to be identity. You just were kind of in the corner, hidden away. Nobody really knew what identity was. And now, finally, people are paying attention to identity in the InfoSec world. But it's really come about in the last few years. As I said, the 75 years EBSCO's been around. They have a number of different companies. We're all over the place in terms of presence with employees. But we have, if you look at this, you don't know any of these, but Moultrie, for example, in the upper right, that's outdoor cameras. So if you ever hunt and put out the cameras that like motion detect and take your pictures of the deer on your property, we sell that. We sell real estate. We sell insurance, digital libraries. Luxor is actually stands, like Veridesk stands. We make those so you can stand up or sit down. So a number of different companies that we support. So the idea behind using Okta in particular is trying to get our hands around locking down accounts, being able to provision and deprovision as quickly as we can. So the company buys and sells, and we never know when they're going to do it. So it's a constant cycle for us. So we're really looking to move away from the traditional AD structure into an IDP with Okta to help us and allow us to start bringing in and taking out businesses as they come and go. So why did we get to Okta, though? It really came back to our CISO, John Graham, who actually came from Jabil before. It was pretty much a mandate, and I thought it was really cool when I was talking to him and interviewing. The CIO has the same belief that John does, that identity is critical. And if we can get our hands around that and control the poor passwords that people have out there, we'll really cut down on the security risks we have. So it's been a big push for us. So we've been using Microsoft for ADFS for quite some time. Made the decision that we were going to go with Okta for provisioning as well, but primarily to standardize on SSO and MFA. And we've actually gotten through that in the first 3 months. And we actually rolled over Office 365 about 3 weeks ago, I think it was. So that really helped us. We were getting hit with spray attacks. Al may talk about that a little bit more later, but that was a huge win for us. So all the applications within Okta are all MFA enabled now, and we're just rolling more and more of those into it. And automation is the next thing. So we'll start looking at ServiceNow, Office 365, and a couple other applications for automation, as well as HR as our master going forward. Oh.
Thank you very much, Willie.
That's fine.
All right, excuse me. All right, well, good afternoon. I'm glad you all kind of packed in here and came to listen to our short spiel. First, I want to thank Okta for allowing us to come and speak on behalf of on Okta's product line. It's been a fantastic journey. We've been able to do quite a few things in a short amount of time, and I really want to thank Okta for that, and thank for a lot of us. We all have some of the same challenges, and I think us as an IT security community, it's good for us to get together and talk about these things and help understand the solutions that are out there today. So a quick short bio of myself. My name is Dixon. Currently, I'm the principal IT security architect at EBSCO. Been there for about 7 years in a number of roles. I've been a 365 administrator. I've also been on the identity access management team, and now I'm in a new role as the principal IT security architect. This is my passion. IT security is my passion. So it's something I enjoy talking about. And if any of you all want to talk, we can have a sidebar and we can get into some details. All right, so let's talk about a little bit of how did we get here? Why did we decide to go to Okta? In a sense, a lot of companies are not quite sure of their maturity just yet when they're actually moving to the cloud. This poor guy here, this is actually a picture of my old boss after I tried to explain to him our enterprise licensing agreement. Yeah, he quit right after that. Anyway, But seriously, I think a lot of companies need to really assess where they are at and within their maturity model. And what we found is that a lot of the cloud adoption happens so fast that a lot of times a lot of companies, senior leaders are not making the best decisions around guardrails of what they should be doing when they make their journey to the cloud. And a lot of times it's not that easy to do because in a sense, you actually have to understand your posture. So we adopted ADFS as a single sign-on platform. We understood it was a little bit less mature, and we knew that we were going to need an actual identity access management platform. We had a number of things happening around our organization as far as multiple single sign-on platforms. And what we saw was that the company itself was suffering from what I call digital identity schizophrenia. We had people using accounts here, and they would use an accounts over here, and you really didn't know quite where or which account to use. And so we found that we needed to centralize those services, and that's where Okta came in and really helped us with that journey. As you know, with ADFS, we had a lot of complexity around that architecture. So just to give you an idea, this is kind of what we had put together when we rolled out to Office 365 as a means of architecture to ensure that single sign-on was there. We know that we had suffered through a number of attacks, password sprays, DDoS attacks. Now here's our infrastructure. It's less complex and way easier to manage. So let's talk about, once we got understood and our maturity level started to go up a little bit, we understood what our business requirements were. We understood what our security requirements were. So now we understood that we needed a much more mature platform such as Okta. We did some searching around and we landed on Okta. We understood that identity lifecycle management for provisioning and deprovisioning accounts was key because in a sense we understood that deprovisioning an account actually had cost benefits to removing licenses for people who weren't utilizing those services anymore. We understood the reduction in cost from the not having too many servers, systems that our system administrators had to actually monitor. One of the big, I think, pieces was MFA. We had a lot of serious security-related issues, and we have, like Willie mentioned, we have business offices all over the world. So if we know that a user is typically logging in France, and all of a sudden now they're logging in from Lickskillet, Alabama. Lickskillet is a real place in Alabama. Okay, I'm kidding. All right. We knew that we needed to possibly take action, investigate that a little bit closer. So in a sense, that helped us with the adaptive multi-factor authentication. The other piece was we needed something that was scalable, and that piece for scalability came with Okta. Here's some of the other benefits of why you should look at moving to Office 365, and we've seen that we benefited from many of these particular items. Now, let's get down to the meat of what you need to do when you get back to the office on Monday. Thou shalt enable MFA. If you're going to be moving to the cloud, take that as commandment number one. Talk to your business leaders within your organization and ensure that they enable MFA. Take a lesson from me. We saw a lot of attacks, and this would have saved us in many instances. Understood that there may be a cultural thing that you may have to go through as part of enabling MFA, but it's a big benefit. And here's some of the other lessons learned that I saw, is that as you move to the cloud, you're going to see that the dynamics of your team are going to change drastically. Identity access management came as a byproduct of us moving to 365, but once we got a little bit more mature and understood that that became a required service, that people were going to need it, then our team started to change a little bit. And this is where we ended up. We have a full identity access management team. We have a security team that are looking at cloud-based things, and we benefit. And last point, communicate, and communicate. Thank you.
I have a thing, and it sounds like I'm on. Oh, sorry, that was the thing. So, okay, I'm Rich Kellen. I am the Chief Information Security Officer for Corvo. As Steve just mentioned, I was a month ago named the head of IT infrastructure. I've been at Corvo about 8 months. Let me ask, anybody ever heard of Corvo? Yeah, see, no, there's, oh, hey, there are two guys with me. So, my last 26 years, I started with HP, and I've been running HP splits. HP split in 99 to Agilent. I went to Agilent. Agilent split in 2014. I went to Keysight, which is part of the split. Corvo recruited me about 8 months ago. So the reason I say that is because a lot of the experience I'll talk about in those splits and in integrations and those kinds of things, if we get into the Q&A, a lot of back and forth with Microsoft, a lot of back and forth with Okta even. I started with Okta back in 2014 at Keysight. Bought a bunch of companies and added them on Okta, and then back in 2017 did an EA and went to Microsoft. So first thing I did when I came to Corvo was take us to Okta. So if that tells you, I've been on both sides of the house. So we'll talk a little bit about some of that. So a little bit about Corvo. We are public. In 2018, a little over $3 billion in revenue. We have about 9,000 employees, about 15,000 clients, and then, of course, a number of engineering things around the company and different stuff. But we play in the RF semiconductor space. Love this picture here. I stole this from an Investor Day picture because people have no idea what RF is. But we're in pretty much everything. I'll bet we're in everybody's pocket or on everybody's wrist or in everybody's something in the audience. So you may not know us, but we're in your life. We play in infrastructure, so all the 5G infrastructure that's getting put in, those are big plays for us, as well as in the mobility devices and those kinds of things. So enough about Corvo as a company. Let's talk some IT stuff. So this is our stack, and the reason I wanted to show you our IT stack a little bit is to show, because a company like Corvo, we were a merger about 4 years ago of two companies that had been in the business for quite a while and had come out of other companies and been around a while. So Corvo's only been around about 4 years, but the two companies that merged are 20, 30 years old. But our model and where the CIO has taken us, I think, since the mergers is pretty much a cloud-first attitude. So we are O365. We have nothing on-prem from an O365 perspective. All our email, everything is in the cloud. This is obviously where Okta plays a big space for us. All of our sales, you can guess which apps those are, our payroll, and about 60 other apps in the cloud, major stuff. But even in our on-prem data centers, so my teams run 3 primary data centers, and then, of course, we have engineering data centers around the world. But about 98% virtualized, 100% virtualized on anything we can. That's our first premise. Bring it in, it's virtualized. So we don't want to run a bunch of servers on-prem. I think Freddie's speech this morning, was really good about why do you want to run IT anymore? That piece is growing very small. So it's either in the cloud or it's virtualized. We want to stay out of the server business as much as possible. Very heavy Microsoft environment. We're 99% x86, so we run a lot of Windows Server in our environment. And since I've been in place about 8 months ago, and I'll show you a slide here in a minute, we put security in the cloud whenever we can. So a lot of old-time security people, I don't know, how many people in the audience are security people versus IT people? So a few people, okay. So I bet some of you that have been in the business for a while said at some time, we're never putting security in the cloud because I don't trust the cloud and everything. And now we all say as much as we can there because it gives us that flexibility to protect what we can everywhere else. And then we deal with a worldwide presence, offices around the world, and 22 of those with IT. So this is what Corvo looks like. We run fabs. We're in the semiconductor, RF semiconductor business. Most of our fabs are in the U.S. I don't think we show the one in Costa Rica up here. But our largest site in the world is in China. We have 2,000 people in China, but we do assembly and test there, so we don't run fabs there for obvious reasons because they want that technology and we don't want them to take that technology. So we do it at these locations here. But what I want you to understand about fabs is much like manufacturing. I spent 20 years in large manufacturing companies, is very high-tech products. You have a lot of high-tech stuff in fabs and manufacturing centers, but you also bring along with that, things that were put in place 20 years ago. We have, XP boxes. We probably have Windows NT boxes in there alongside this really high-tech, super expensive stuff. So from a security perspective, we have to protect old and new in these critical facilities that, are very sought after technology if you understood some of those initials under there, which I'm not going to test you on later. On the other spectrum of that, we are extremely mobile. So if you don't work in a fab, our workforce is at 55 engineering sites around the world. We create IP in the south of France. We create IP in, everywhere in Asia, everywhere in Europe, Germany, all over the United States, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Boston, Florida, et cetera. So we have to deal with that mobile dispersed workforce that's really handling critical data for us. And protecting that when, if you look at, again, going back to our applications all being in the cloud, whether it's Office 365, the OneDrives, the SharePoints, payroll apps, sales apps, HR apps, it's all that critical data for us is in the cloud. And if it's not in the cloud, it's moving around on people's computers now. And so of our clients, I said we had about 15,000 clients, about 75% of those are mobile. That's a high percentage for those of you that aren't in the infrastructure business. Okay, Steve wanted me to show this slide here, so I had to take off all the confidential words on it and everything. So the reason I show this is my security stack. Okay, so this is one I did for the board of directors recently, and you'll notice up there it doesn't say Microsoft anywhere. Okay, and it's kind of funny. I already said we're an extremely Microsoft shop. We have a Microsoft EA. We've had them for years. We love Microsoft, but to be frank, I want Microsoft to play in their space. How many security people that have worked on EAs and things, or if you talked about Microsoft ATP, or you've talked about Azure AD, or you've talked about all those things, how many people have been in conversations where you've heard, well, we think it's good enough? Anybody ever heard that? Yeah, there's one right there. Okay, there's the honest person. I think there's a couple of, we can't see past the first three people, the first three rows. But in the security business, you should never be saying it's good enough because some CIO wants you to contract it because it's an easier contract, or Microsoft has negotiated in, hey, we'll give you Windows really cheap, we'll give you this really cheap, but we want you on the EMM stack or whatever. And we can talk about some of that bundling and unbundling in a little bit, but what we did by not putting our security stack into Microsoft, and we just renegotiated our EA 8 months ago when I came in. They asked me to help them with that negotiation. And the first one we pulled out was once we needed MFA. I came into a company that didn't have MFA. I liked your speech, MFA first. That needs to be first. We bought off on that. So Okta was the first one in the stack we pulled out. And then we went to CrowdStrike because we needed an ATP, and Microsoft was saying, oh no, we can't sell a client ATP by itself. Now they can because they're seeing people start to go the other directions and those kinds of things. Then just recently we put in place Proofpoint. Instead of ATP in the cloud. So what you see is it gives you the ability, if you break that, to go with best-of-breed technologies, things that actually work for your environments, and we're able to go back and look at what it is we're supporting. And so this isn't an anti-Microsoft speech, by the way. I don't want to come across at all, because we're full-blown. I spoke at Ignite 2 years ago on Microsoft O365 deployments. I'm fully a Microsoft supporter, but when I'm talking about security and as the CISO versus my role as the infrastructure head, I've got to pay attention to what's the best for the environment. And so much we get into those decisions, again, because of the contracts more than anything else. And trust me, my board asks me those questions, and my CIO is like, are you sure? And I'm like, if you want to make the decision on what we buy, fine, you go ahead, but then you're in charge of security. So he didn't want to do that. All right. And this is why we bought Okta. So we wanted to make sure that that security stack we had, whether it's in the cloud, whether it's on-prem, that we knew who you were when you're accessing it. Multi-factor. The first thing, we all get phished every day. Corvo, we have very highly sought-after technology. If you knew what we did, you'd know why. But the first thing we were seeing, and we were seeing it regularly when we didn't have MFA, the first thing hackers do now is if they get somebody to click on the phish, in 10 seconds, they just go straight to the O365 site, put in your email, they've got your password, they download everything you've got. So it doesn't matter if your security teams and everything change your passwords and everything 30 minutes, they've already got your entire email box, right? So the reason for that MFA first, and we wanted to go after Okta first, was to at least kill that. If we could stop them from that ability to download and do all of that, heavy lifting, then at least then we can go focus on, the phishing stuff with Proofpoint, the client stuff with CrowdStrike, et cetera. So anyway, And that's me, Corvo, all around you. That's our saying. So you got it? You want the clicker?
Thanks so much, Rich. So what I wanted to do now is just, obviously I want to dig into the unbundling piece, but I wanted to give Willie and Al a quick chance. We talked about MFA pretty heavily here. Was there anything in your journey that Okta helped with that? How did you feel that that was a beneficial piece? Or talk a little bit more about that part of it. Okay. Either Willie or Al.
I can start. I think Okta's been very helpful along the way. I mean, they've got a good roadmap whenever you're rolling out their software in terms of customer success, project management team, the information they give you for education for your end users. It's all about communication in the end, and that's probably been the most difficult process. Okta was easy. Enabling MFA, it's a piece of cake. It's the communication going out to tell people when it's going to happen and what it means to you and what you've got to do to get to that point. So, but yeah, Okta was great along the way. We chose to go with VPN first. We were using Microsoft for VPN, but we figured if we hit those users first, those are the most technical users. We'll see what kind of issues we'll run into, get those registered, and that would set the stage for everything else, and then we can work our way out from there. And it worked well, but it was, what you'll find out whenever you're doing something and you're telling an organization that you're going to make a change, nobody reads the same thing. So you can send out an email, you can put out Yammer, you can put out SharePoint, you could, fly a plane over their building and, somebody might see it. But at the end of the day, there will be people that think you did a great job with communication if you do it enough, and then there'll always be somebody that complains.
That's great. Anything to add there?
Yeah, I can add a little bit more to that. Just like Willie said, the communication is key, and especially as you're rolling out these large projects, you have to get out there in front of the customer, because we as IT security people, we kind of sometimes forget about the customer experience. But we also have a job to do as well. We're there to help protect them. I know for our department, information security specifically, we had 3 products that we were actually using for MFA that was sprawled around the actual company, and we managed it within our department. So there was an opportunity there, of course, to collapse those systems, and that happened fairly quickly, and we moved it actually to Octa, and they were able to come in and actually help us, advise us on exactly what to do. We target areas such as VPN. Right after that, 365 to close off those gaps where we saw those phishing threats that were happening from those malicious guys out there. So it was a big benefit. MFA is key, and if you haven't start selling it to your senior leadership, do it Monday morning. Tell them, I know it's cultural, but we have to turn on MFA.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Al and Willie. I was just checking to make sure you had a mic. So Rich, you touched on something that is very close to me, but I'd like you to dig into that a little bit deeper. I think, actually, how many people in the audience here are aware that you can actually start to dismantle or unbundle your EA?
How many people in the audience have EAs?
Yeah. And how many of those folks are either on or considering an E5 or being told they should consider an E5? I mean, that's the playbook, right? So,
yeah.
So again, I think I just want to say real quickly, I totally agree with Rich. I think Okta, we see ourselves as being strong on the identity and security side. That's what we're very good at. We feel that Microsoft is a strong partner for all of you, right? They're a fantastic product from a productivity perspective. Where we think that is a difference is some of the things that these gentlemen have explained today. And I'd like to go into that EA unbundling piece and kind of walk through what are the signals or what are the things that you would look for or tell a customer interested in doing the same thing to look for in their usage of, say, technology before they might consider an unbundling? What are the key ingredients to kind of starting that process?
No, it's good. It's probably not hypothetical because I know my Okta guy has had me come in and help a few of his accounts figure some of this a little bit. So first of all, hopefully everybody knows, Microsoft, like a lot of other companies, you've always got to leave them, for your next negotiation, because an EA is going to end, 3 years or whatever you sign, and if you don't have something to grow into, you hit the point where costs start to jack up, right? That's what they get to. So you've always got to have something in your head that you want to give them, but in their mind, they have to grow because that's the mandate. But going into an EA renegotiation, or when you do your annual true-ups and those kinds of things, a lot of companies, in my previous companies, we just said, yeah, we'll take everything, just give it to us. It's easier to count that way. We didn't even profile our users. So in my current company, because we have large fab manufacturing organization, we've done E1s and E3s. We don't do E5, obviously, because I just showed you why. So if you profile your customers to say, why am I paying for E3s even for 3,000 of these people when all they do is email in the cloud? They don't access anything. They don't do SharePoints. They don't do any of this stuff.
So if you have like a mix of knowledge and non-knowledge workers, yep. Would you say that would be a situation?
Absolutely. That is our situation. And a lot of companies have that situation, but Microsoft doesn't always go to them and say, hey, you should profile your users first off. Now, if they're working on their first sale and they're coming into it and they really want to get it, they'll say, hey, you can profile because that way you don't have to pay as much for all these guys. But the problem is when you get into things like Azure AD and these kinds of things, whether you're on E1 or E5, everything they do is still done by headcount, or depending on the license. So everything you have to do, whether they access one app or 50 apps, you're still paying for them to do that. Okay, and there's others beyond identity, but this is where people get confused in the Microsoft contracting. It's designed to everything to be cost the same. Right? So if you look at, if you buy O365 and they say, oh, you can put it on 5 clients, right, for free, right? Is that still the number Microsoft uses, isn't it? Is you get it 5 devices. Mm-hmm. Well, if you have large R&D labs, I have some guys that have 30 computers in their names. Well, that means I have to buy them 5 different O365 licenses because some of that is client-based and if they have different things on them. Now, maybe I only needed one identity because it's still the same person logging in. So you really need to understand your profile and what you're using, what you're not using, because that gives you the power to go into a Microsoft contract negotiation and talk. Because again, they'll show you the slide that says, bundle it all in because, and actually they show it with the 3 products I use. They'll say, if you went with CrowdStrike, Proofpoint, and Okta, it would cost you $1.5 million to, just do these products. And I will tell you, I went with CrowdStrike, Proofpoint, and Okta, and I'm not allowed to talk about pricing and stuff, but it cost me less than if I'd have gone just with Microsoft for those products, equivalent products. And then I would have been just back to but they're good enough, right? And we did bake-offs, by the way. We did bake-offs on the client stuff. We did bake-offs on the identity stuff. We did bake-offs on even on the Proofpoint stuff. Microsoft never won, not a single time. My hackers were able to get through on certain things. So again, they want to be a security company, but that's not where they come from. Until they say that's what we're going to do full time, like Okta said, this is what we do identities, and we're kind of doing identities up. If Microsoft put the money of their company and said, we only want to do that, great, then let's do that. But they can't take away from those things that are their bread and butter. So.
And is this a journey that a customer has to do themselves, or is this something where there could be help and partners, either your resellers or your ISVs? Is there a way they can help you to do this?
Having people that have done negotiations with them before is always helpful. The value-added resellers that Microsoft contracts, because you can only use certain ones, the ones that are about, they'll help you with counts and things, but they're not designed to say, hey, but you should look over here for this, unless they're the reseller you're going to use for that one over there, or they're working on a better deal. But typically you get into that, the VAR isn't going to help you as much with it. For anybody that's a Gartner customer, Gartner is extremely helpful in this space. They've got some really good experts that know, what Microsoft is being compensated on today, what they've seen in other contracts, negotiations from a product perspective and stuff. So if you're not a Gartner and you're working on an EA and you're wanting to unbundle it, they can help you with strategy, I think probably the best. Or find your Okta rep and they can find somebody that helped them do it. So.
No, got it. We're working on that. Let's see. I guess and you kind of hinted at it earlier on, but I just want one more question for you, Rich. From the perspective of when you face a CIO or a CEO or CFO, for that matter, who is kind of pressuring you to, and you had a glib comment, but I just wanted, I think these are conversations that a lot of our customers are having, that they're being told that we have this or the potential to have this upgrade to the E5 or what have you, or have an EM&S on there. What do you say to them as a CISO?
Yeah, so as a CISO, it's pretty easy. I go after the security aspect. So for me, saying, look, this is not the best product. This is the best product. If you're a Gartner guy, and all CIOs tend to be Gartner people, or even CFOs, it's easy to say with a thing like Okta, right? They've been in the top right since day one. Microsoft got close to them for a couple of years, and now they've, I think, even dropped down a little bit. You've got Centrify up there with you a little bit, but so you can use things like that, but as the CISO, it's easy for me to tell the CFO and the CIO, the board, hey, we're going after this. This is why. Get them all excited. Of course, there's always going to come back and see a cost, and that's always got to be a line item I show them. But in the end, the board is being held to cyber risk now as much as they are to any other financial risk. And if you sell it as this, and you're that guy, you're the head of security, again, no CIO should override a CISO when they're passionate.
Oh, that's fair enough. So stand by your
guns.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, there's a guy in our region that my sales rep had me talking, and he had been talking to Okta for like 2.5 years. And it wasn't because he didn't want Okta, it was because he was trying to convince his company that he could get out of Microsoft and this stuff. So he's finally now an Okta customer now. So, but the work for him was convincing the CIO in the company that it made sense to dismantle pieces. Yeah,
so before we go to Q&A, I wanted to ask Willie and Al really quickly. I mean, it's kind of crazy when you showed that slide with the hundreds and hundreds of different companies that you guys own. Like we talk about at Okta, the M&A agility story and being able to do that and enable it. Could you is there anything in terms of a story there in terms of how we've been able to help you to pull in an organization or facilitate that a little bit better?
I don't have anything immediate because we've had 3 acquisitions since I've been there, but they've been relatively small, and we incorporated them into the whole MFA process like everybody else.
Pretty straightforward.
I do think that it's it makes sense with what we're doing and what Okta is doing. There was a presentation yesterday showing how to build out instead of having to collapse domains to build those out. It just that seems like the natural progression for us. So going back to your earlier question,
Sure.
Microsoft can offer a lot of different things to you, but how many times does Microsoft give you something and it's not 100% and there's like a bolt-on on top of it to fix it? There's always, so even if you had an E5, how quickly can your team pick that information up and do something with it? We took Okta. We had no experience with Okta at EBSCO starting in November of last year, and we have 6 people that can go in and administer Okta today with adding a company, adding users, setting up whatever we need to, SSO or MFA in there. It is very intuitive, and Microsoft could. I mean, if Microsoft would have had that capability with ADFS, then Okta may not exist now. But they didn't do it. So that's, somebody said, hey, I can do this better. And that's why we bought the product. So it is a cost thing. At the end of the day, you have a budget and you only have so much that you can spend. And if you're going to go buy E5 licenses, then you're not going to buy any other products, at least for us. So we're still in an early infancy of an information security program at EBSCO. That's what we were hired to come in and help build out. And just the cost of what we have to spend to get us where we need to be is going to be a lot of money. So we have to be very selective on what is a priority for us and what's not. And I mean, we have not made the formal decision that we're not going with the Microsoft E5, but it's interesting as we go through those. You get to tools like we were seeing on the screen just a minute ago with CrowdStrike, Carbon Black, Okta. Those are those tools that a lot of people use and get a lot of value out of it. So.
No, thank you.
But it's ease of use. I mean, I'm telling you, I'm thrilled to death how quickly my team picked up Okta and so proud of how they picked it up.
That's a great point. Al, anything to add?
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that as well. EBSCO is a very interesting company because we have so many different lines of businesses, and they all do something different. So you can imagine from the security side of things, governance is a challenge, and there's always a use case for something. With Octa, however, with us having those mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures, those activities are really fast-paced, especially for us. And so when they come to us and say, hey, we bought a new company or we want to, I coined the phrase, they're called MAD activities, right? Mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, because they move so fast. And so they want us to be able to spin on the dime to say, okay, we got this new company, we bring them in, get them onto our email system, bring in their directory services. Well, before we didn't really have an avenue for that before. And so as probably some of the people have already seen some of the capabilities of Okta in order to incorporate those new directories, incorporate those new email systems into its universal directory. So this has been a huge benefit for us. Going back to the earlier question, I think one of the things that companies have to do, especially as you're sitting around talking with your Microsoft rep, is understand where your gaps are. And doing just a basic SWOT analysis of your company to understand that the things that they may be pitching to you, you may not necessarily need right now. And a lot of times, finances are, finite. So we don't have a whole lot of money to just spend on these bells, these whistles. We may have specific things that we're trying to address, phishing, MFA, those type of things we need to address right now. We don't need to be caught in the lingo of here's an E5, but you need a P2 for the Azure piece, and here's another bolt-on. Your technology people, your senior leadership, your security people have to be knowledgeable of what exactly is needed. And that can come from a standard risk assessment from your organization, if you have a kind of a governance structure there, so you can identify what those needs are, because the salesman is going to try to sell you. And he's going to offer everything, but maybe you didn't need the leather seats. Not in Alabama anyway, but maybe you didn't need that particular piece, but it's understanding exactly what you need when you're going into those discussions.
That's great. Thank you, Al. So we just have a few more minutes. I'm just going to leave this up there really quickly before we jump into Q&A. If you are interested in having a bit more understanding about what it looks like to do that true down, we are offering workshops. And if you want to sign up, go to this link, this bit.ly link. It'll just be a simple one. Send your email in. We will respond to you and schedule you up. But if you're interested in that. And at this point, I'd like to go ahead and open up to Q&A to anybody in the audience.
So what do you think the smallest company size is that you'd be able to start doing these sorts of unbundling activities? We're currently Microsoft E3.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Sorry, we're currently on Microsoft E3, but we're only a 400-person company. Are we going to be able to unbundle at that sort of scale, do you think?
I can take this one a little bit, and I actually just did some consulting for one of our board members, nonprofits he does, and it was a smaller company than ours. So the way I understand the question is, does it make sense for you to try to unbundle because of the size of your company, right? It depends. So you're probably, better off doing as many things with Microsoft as you can, because you can go up for much cheaper. Now, does E5 make sense for you? Does you're not at a true huge, because Microsoft's discounts get smaller as you get smaller, right? So larger companies, we get bigger discounts. It's kind of weirdly unfair, right? But you also lose a certain amount of negotiating power with some of those other companies. Your ability to get their pricing way down is harder. Is that kind of...
I'm ex a very large bank, and I've discovered that the same techniques seem to work with the security vendors regardless of your size.
Do they? Okay, good. Yeah. So that's. I'm glad you said it out loud. So what I was going to say is there's some, and where I was going to tell you is you're going to be better off in some of those cases going direct yourself and trying to find a VAR to take a cut and do all of that. And but go ahead. You're
direct with Octa, direct with CISO, direct with CrowdStrike.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a balance, but but again, 400 people, but it goes back to what are you doing? Are you growing? Are you in a growing phase? You're in an acquisition phase? Because if you know you're going to acquire and things, your Microsoft bill is just all across the board going to go up and up and up and up much faster, than say, I bought Okta, I bought 400 licenses, but if you know you're going to acquire, maybe you want to negotiate 500 licenses. These are the same things I've done, knowing where we're going, and sometimes the CIO will go, but you just bought 1,000 extra licenses. I'm like, yeah, and I also know there's 3 acquisitions we're working on or whatever, and it was easier for me to negotiate the pricing across the board, and then they're like, oh, okay, right. So some of those tricks, and it sounds like you know them, which is good. So.
An objection or a concern that I've heard from customers is when you unbundle, the cost of the items that you're going to be keeping are going to go up in cost, right? Because it's not just take this out and leave everything else flat. What's your perspective on that concern?
So back to my original comment was you need to know what you want to do with Microsoft, right? Because you've got to offer them something typically to keep at that renegotiating phase, because that you will lose your discount ability. So what he's saying is if I unbundle and I think, then they're going to jack my prices up on the things I have. First of all, when you work with any company, hopefully, when you sign a 3-year deal, you put a clause in that says maximize my increase on the next 3-year deal. But if you don't do that, you should have your procurement people look at those kinds of things, okay? Because that protects you, because anybody naturally is going to try to jump. Now, Microsoft in general, their pricing has actually come down on certain products over the years, right? But it's because they still have to grow, they're selling additional things. So if all you need is Office, well, first of all, sales reps don't get compensated on Office anymore. People think, well, Office that's at the most. If you know what Microsoft reps get compensated on, and it's very public, Gartner will tell you, because every year they change it like anybody else. You go into an educated negotiation. But I really want something more valuable to me, Windows. So give me a Windows contract, because I don't want to do my Windows by clients anymore. I want to do them by users. They've got so many different pieces you can put in there that you don't need to focus on, the identities and the client things unless you want them. But there are some things you might want, right? So again, they have some really good products. Know what you want, but take that assessment before you go into the negotiation. Don't start the negotiation and then start to figure out what you want and what you need. So.
I think we have one last question real quick. You guys have one? All right. I'll call it a day. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.